Welcome to those of you watching and to the candidates. Good evening. My name is Sarah Ellyn, and I am co-president of the League of Women Voters of Glen, Ellyn. On behalf of the 6 local league chapters that are hosting tonight's events, I want to thank you for joining us for the US Congressional District 6 Democratic Candidate Forum. The forum is virtual. We ask that the candidates and viewers eliminate distractions and give the forum their undivided attention as they would for an in-person event. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We encourage the informed and active participation of citizens in government. The League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Our moderator this evening is Patty Lackman. Patty has been a member of the League of Women Voters since 2002, serving as Vice President and President, as well as Voter Service Chair of the League of Women Voters of Batavia. In 2010, the Leagues of Batavia and Geneva St. Charles merged to become the League of Women Voters Central Kane County. Patty was subsequently elected as one of 3 vice presidents, a position she currently holds, and also holds the position of Voter Services Chair. Welcome, Patty, and thank you very much for moderating this forum tonight.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening. It is an honor for me to be moderating this evening's candidate forum. All Democratic candidates on the ballot were invited to participate, and all 3 are joining us tonight. I'd like to begin by reviewing some of the league ground rules for candidate forums. All candidates attending tonight have signed and returned the ground rules by the deadline of April 6, 2022. These rules specify the format, time limits, and other rules related to the conduct of this forum. I will be responsible for enforcing these rules. The candidates will begin in alphabetical order with their opening statements. They will alternate the order in which they answer questions. And after the question portion of the forum, each candidate will give a closing statement. Each candidate will be given 1 minute for their opening statement, 1 minute to respond to each question, unless I specify otherwise, and 1 minute to make a closing statement. Their responses will be timed, as you will see on the screen. The questions have been gathered in advance from the public. A panel of experienced members of the League of Women Voters have reviewed the questions submitted and carefully screened for appropriateness and for the office and to avoid duplications for tonight's event. The format tonight is a candidate forum, not a debate format. Candidates are expected to accurately represent the facts. The League of Women Voters is not responsible for the accuracy of statements made by candidates. It is the responsibility of the public, news media, opposing candidates, et al. To fact check statements made by the candidates if deemed necessary. This forum is held as a service to the voters so that they can hear directly from the candidates regarding views on key issues and qualifications. To be of best service to the voters, candidates' responses are to reflect their own views and opinions and refrain from commenting on the views of other candidates. The event today is being recorded. The League claims copyright ownership of any recording or transcript produced of the forum. The forum will be posted in its entirety on the 6 host League websites, social media platforms, and the Illinois Voter Guide. Any other use of the forum recording requires the express written approval of League. Audio and video must be broadcast unedited and in its entirety, except by the media reporting on events. Finally, I want to emphasize how grateful we are for these candidates who are not only willing to serve in office, but who agreed to come here this evening. Candidates, please start your video. Good evening. Today's first candidate is Sean Caston. Candidate Caston, your opening statement, please.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's my privilege to have represented the 6th District over these last 2 terms. I'm a scientist and an entrepreneur, a husband and a father, and I've dedicated my life to addressing climate change. I ran for Congress in 2018 because at the end of the day, I think there's a lot more that unites us than divides us. The overwhelming majority of us trust science and believe democracy is worth defending. We know that we're only as good as the world we leave to our children. Now, it's easy to lose sight of that unity in the political arena, but it doesn't make it any less true. And so far, I'm happy to report that I was right. I've been endorsed by everybody from the former head of the Illinois GOP last term to progressive champions like Maxine Waters and Katie Porter this term, not because I ever waffled on my values, but because I've always treated folks with respect and always looked for the win-win. Through over 50 town halls on issues ranging from climate change to reproductive rights to Iran to impeachment, the tough stuff. Through legislative work on climate change, consumer protection, student debt, and algorithmic bias in big tech. The district once represented by Henry Hyde is now pro-choice. That's a big deal, especially this week. It's also pro-climate and unabashedly democratic with a lowercase d, and that's pretty awesome. I'm proud to have earned your trust and hope to do so again in June.
Candidate Hughes, your opening statement, please.
I'd like to thank everybody for having me here tonight. I'm running because I want to make a difference in the lives of middle class. First of all, climate change is a big issue, and we're buying Russian oil, which is dirty, which is unregulated. And then you have to bring it back to America, and our oil companies in America have to refine it so we can really use it. So Congress missed the ball on that. And we want to make a little difference in the lives of middle class because we want to raise Social Security and to try to help the middle class. And we have to fix healthcare and we have to fix infrastructure. And most of all, we have to change dark money, corporate money, and all the stuff that Congress does through the day because they're raising money instead of helping the middle class. And that's wrong. And look at Ukraine. We have to help them. And we're failing that too because we didn't give them planes or we didn't do certain things to stop Russia from advancing. And I'm running because most of all, it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Hughes. Candidate Newman, your opening statement, please.
Well, good evening, everyone. I am Congresswoman Newman. I am the current congressperson for the Southwest suburbs and the Western suburbs. And League, please accept my thanks for this great undertaking tonight. I think we're going to have a very robust and dimensionalized discussion, and I really appreciate the hard work that goes into it, and also the collaboration with all the leagues throughout the district in Cook and DuPage. So my greatest thanks. And thank you to my colleagues on the dais for having a great conversation tonight. So a little bit about me. I'm a former small business owner. I ran a management consultancy. I'm a management consultant by trade. I also founded a nonprofit program, a national nonprofit called Team Up to Stop Bullying. I have worked in the healthcare advocacy space, the gun safety space, and several other advocacy spaces. It is my great privilege to be born and raised in the middle of Illinois 6, the new Illinois 6 district. And that lived experience is very important to me, but it's very important to my constituents. And I will always respond to my constituents first. And I appreciate the time tonight.
Thank you. Question 1, and we will start with Candidate Hughes. Are you in favor of campaign finance reform? If so, how would you implement it over the next 5-year period?
I'd like to stop the dark money and the big money. And how I would implement it is slowly each year, certain amount of raised money. So let's say the first year you can only raise 200,000, then 100,000, then 50,000, and then 20,000, and have the media get more involved so that the people can be seen, all candidates equally, not just the rich. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Newman.
Thank you and I am very passionate about this. So I have supported my good colleague, John Sarbanes For the People Act, very obviously, and all of those Democratic bills that include campaign finance reform. It's one of our greatest challenges. You know why nothing gets done in Congress? Because we have issues with this, and the issue is corporate PAC money. Those that take money from corporate donors that are vis-a-vis their PACs is really problematic. I have colleagues that take millions of dollars from corporate PACs and clearly vote against things like climate action and things that will help everybody's every day. So ending corporate PAC money, I think, is the best and first thing we should do.
Thank you. Candidate Caston.
So when I came in 2018 and we flipped the House campaign finance reform, that was the first bill we passed, HR 1. We worked a lot on the bill that we've passed again this term. The structure of what we've done there to make it work, which is based on the model that works in New York, and as New York City developed this, is a small dollar matching program, which I think is the right way to do it because it makes sure that you still have to be credible, but if you're getting small dollar donations, you get a 6-to-1 match for doing that. We passed that in the House. We passed it in the House again this year. This year, we had control of the Senate and we expected the Senate to bring it up. Senator Manchin tried to do so. And ultimately, after lots of modification, could not get any senators to come along. And that's why I've been as outspoken as I have about getting rid of the filibuster. We sent a letter out with myself and Cori Bush and Jason Crow and Pramila Jayapal at the beginning of this term, calling on the Senate to get rid of the filibuster because it is more important to preserve our democracy than the filibuster. And I hope we can get the Senate to that point.
Thank you. Question 2, and we'll start with candidate Newman. And I'm giving you 2 minutes for this one.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Do you support the US government's continued funding of Ukraine's defense against Russia? And what should the US do to address the increase of authoritarianism across the globe?
Well, let me start by thanking President Biden and the administration for a tremendous job in the run-up to this horrifying war and illegal war. I will tell you, Putin started in Syria and practiced in Syria. Then he perfected his evil ways in Crimea, and now he's in Ukraine. In the 6-month run-up to this, our president and our Secretary of State did an amazing job of coordinating our NATO forces to orchestrate a sanctioning system that is working incredibly well and disempowering Putin's economy. So this is really important to note because some people are saying that President Biden tiptoed into this. He was measured and a statesman and more, and did a beautiful job with that. Now, we have given humanitarian aid, we have given weaponry, we have given military training and the like. We must keep that up. I think it's critically important that we work with our NATO partners. The beauty of this, and I have not seen this degree of NATO coordination and orchestration in my adult life. So at the end of the day, I think that we're doing a very good job and we should keep it up. There is nothing more important than making sure the Ukrainian people are safe. But I also want to give credit to the Ukrainian people. My goodness, they are amazing. Their fortitude and their work to save their democracy. And we have to help democracy wherever we can. It is important for any culture to have the government and the model of governing that they want. But if they want democracy, we should help them in any way that we can. So throughout this, the pro-authoritarianism kick-up we're having, we should be helping all of these countries have the model of government that they want, and we should be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Caston, sorry.
So I want to echo Congresswoman Newman's point. President Biden has just been fantastic on this issue. I mean, think about the fact that 2 years ago, it was deeply partisan to provide military aid to Ukraine. It was deeply partisan to stand up to Putin. It was deeply partisan to support NATO. And not only are we doing all those things now, but we've done it in a way that we have brought the Republicans around to finally standing up to these things. We'll see how long they last, but man, our life is easier. Trust me, I have too much experience in the last term with how difficult it was when that was a partisan issue. As relates to the aid, we are in a transition point that is really difficult right now. And of course, the circumstances on the ground are changing every day. When we want to provide every ounce of aid we can to our friends in Ukraine, stand up to Russia, and yet we don't want to trigger a world war. We were very conscious in the first phase as Russia was attacking Ukraine of making sure that the aid we were providing was for defensive weapons, the kind of weapons you use to protect yourself when somebody else is coming in, that would give Ukraine everything they needed, but would not be seen as a provocation to Russia. As Russia has now taken over parts of the Donbass and the eastern regions, the weapons that Ukraine needs are now really offensive weapons. And so we've expanded the scope of what we're providing, which is appropriate, but we're being very careful. And as long as Ukraine's intent remains defensive, that's okay, but we got to be very careful about that. The second thing we're doing, which is no less important, and a lot of this is on the Financial Services Committee, I said, is all of those sanctions around Russia. We are starving their economy. We're trying to make sure that those sanctions are structured in such a way that when we get to the end of this period, we don't create a 2020s version of Russia that looks like Germany in the 1930s, because we can cripple the Russian economy. We don't want to do any avoidable harm to the Russian people. And thankfully, legislation we developed last term that we finally passed around beneficial ownership laws so that we can finally start looking into the companies that Putin and other autocrats are using to hide their wealth and can go in and get access to that and block it. We're still rolling it out. It's important. So it's in flux. I'm pleased with what we're doing so far, but it ain't over yet.
Thank you. Candidate Hughes.
Well, first of all, Biden did a great job. He stopped buying Russian oil, which they lost money, Russia, so they couldn't feed their military to kill women and children. It's a renewable war for climate change because that's why they're doing it. Also, on the front, we have to globalize democracy. And that's another reason Biden did what he did by sanctions, because we have to keep our allies realizing that democracy is the best way to go. And the aggression of Putin is just wrong. They're killing women, children. They have no remorse. And we have to do something. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. We're giving them money, military and help and aid and everything like that. And I commend the congressmen, both of them. I'm not here to bad rap them. I think that's good that they actually are on the right side of this topic here. So we have to keep pushing. I think there's 30 billion. Am I right, Sean Caston? If you can jump in, I think we're trying to give them more money. I think it's the right thing to do. And same with Newman. I think they're doing the right thing if they support the president. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 3, and we'll start with candidate Caston. How do you foresee the recently signed Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act specifically impacting District 6?
Well, we're going to get about $10 billion coming in for roads and bridges, which is fantastic. About $100 million to expand rural broadband, which is also fantastic. Because of all the climate work I did, we had a huge package of EV funding. A lot of that ended up in Build Back Better, but we still got about 149 million that's in this infrastructure act, so we can start building out a charging infrastructure in Illinois. And as some of you know, I've sort of got a thing about transmission and making sure that we have the wires to connect up to our grid. And so we've got about $2.5 billion spread over the country, not enough, but to start connecting that wind downstate up to the loads up in Illinois. So those are the really big pieces. I should mention that we've also bringing a bunch of local projects back. Was really proud to just bring several $100,000 to the Boys and Girls Club up in Dundee to provide education for students who have been set back through the COVID period. And we're going to continue to bring all that local support back as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hughes.
I think Washington made a mistake in a way. They did this infrastructure, but then they did a remap. A lot of this infrastructure was in the old 6th and the old 3rd. I'm not cutting the 2 congressmen down. That's just what happens. We lost money, but the new 6th, I don't know, we got about maybe 14 million. And we could have done better, but it wasn't their fault. It was the remap. Thank you.
Candidate Newman.
Thank you. So I am a proud member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and worked on several of these dispersal mechanisms as well as other clear processes so we could get the money to Illinois farther, faster to the appropriate folks and could be spent appropriately, not just through the state, but through county and municipalities and through organizations. So thrilled to report today, we are starting to see that money come through and couldn't be more excited. It is with great pride that our delegation, including our 2 senators, brought $17 billion to fix actually 9 of the bridges that exist in the new Illinois 6 and work on a clear highway construction, also working on green projects. I have funded and brought funding to the district as part of this that will electrify buses around Midway Airport, as well as work on renewable projects with CTA, working in direct concert with them. So thrilled that the IIJA is starting to come to fruition right here in the new Illinois 6, and thank you.
Thank you. Question 4, and we'll start with candidate Hughes. Describe your ideal healthcare plan for the country.
Okay, that would be, First, I would like to make sure we give everyone a premium tax credit. That means everyone, so help with affordable health care. Second, I would also like to make all healthcare insurance plans acceptable to HSA, so they're universal. I believe we can fix the ACA and add a public health care called the DC Health Link. That's my plan. And Congress uses the DC Health Link. They get a lot of options. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Newman.
So I'm a former management consultant and did a lot of work in the healthcare space and have done truly a 360 on this. In addition to being a patient and having three folks in my home that actually need significant healthcare on a daily basis. So I'm very knowledgeable on the healthcare space. And over the last many years, it is clear to me that we need to do a more practical approach. While the ACA brought 20,000 of us right here in the district on the rolls, which was fantastic, and it was a good stepping stone, it's just a very impractical system because it keeps getting broken down and underfunded, and the funding gets taken away. So I think that taking a system that we already have in place for 50 plus years called Medicare and expanding it to include vision, dental, hearing, long-term healthcare, and rolling it out over time in a methodical fashion is the best way to go. It's the most practical. It will reduce costs for healthcare providers, for patients, and for the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Caston.
Well, look, the ideal plan is easy. Everybody has access to care regardless of your ability to pay, and it's the best care in the world. Let's shoot for that. We're a long way from it right now. The United States spends over $10,000 per person on healthcare, and our outcomes are not as good as a lot of countries that are our peers. We have to get to universal healthcare. I think where there's a difference between myself and Congresswoman Newman is that when I look around the world, the countries that have universal healthcare that provide choice have better health outcomes than the countries that have a single payer. And intuitively, that makes a lot of sense, right? If you've got a union plan that's really great for you, you might prefer that to Medicare. Maybe you've got an employer plan that you like a lot. Maybe you prefer that one. As long as you have those choices in the system, it keeps everybody else honest. And so I think the idea of universal healthcare is separate from the idea of single payer. And in fact, the countries like Germany and Switzerland that have that model of choice and universality have the best outcomes and the best value per price. Part of my hesitation also is that we have spent now 4 years trying to allow Medicare to negotiate the price of pharmaceuticals. It's like a flypaper for lobbyists. I don't think making it bigger reduces that risk.
Thank you. Question 5. What is your position on abortion? Should this be regulated federally or state by state? We'll start with candidate Newman.
Well, thank you. This is something near and dear to my heart. I've been in this fight for 30 years around women's rights and access to reproductive care. I started a clinic in the West Loop, and we need leaders right now that are very serious and have been doing this for a long time. And so, to be clear, and very obviously, I'm pro-choice, but what is important here is that the turn of events in the last 36 hours, we have to take note for, and for a few reasons. One is that we're lucky here in Illinois. Our access to abortion is enshrined with a law that was created 2 years ago. So we're lucky here. 5 other states have that. But all the other states are going to be in dire shape. Particularly will be at risk is women of color and folks that are in disadvantaged areas. So this is a real challenge for us. But more importantly than all of that is that all of our rights are at jeopardy now. This very conservative court isn't going to be happy with taking women's agency over their body away. They're going to be coming after your economic rights, your healthcare rights, LGBTQ rights, and civil rights and voting rights. We must put a stop to this and federalize being pro-choice and allowing it to be enshrined in the Women's Health Protection Act.
Thank you. Candidate Caston.
I am absolutely 100% pro-choice in all cases. This is the only person who should have any say over whether or not they get an abortion as a woman, with consultation of her doctor. I want to take a little bit of an issue with the way you framed the question of should this be subject to federal or state regulation, because I think some of the folks on the Supreme Court have said that they are just giving this to the states where it belongs. I don't care who you are. It is none of your business. This shouldn't be people in Washington making the decision, or Springfield or Des Moines or anywhere else in the country. This is about choice. And we have the opportunity in the House. We did pass the Women's Health Protection Act that would codify Roe into law, would provide those protections. We passed it in the House, barely. We didn't get a single Republican vote. We got all but one Democratic vote. So I'm glad we've got a pro-choice majority now. The Senate didn't bring it up. I spent much of today working on a letter with Congresswoman Judy Chu, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and Congresswoman Cori Bush, and we are going to finalize this. Marie will send you a copy. We'd love to have you on it as well. We were just working on it today to push Schumer again to say, you've got to get rid of the filibuster, because when we sent that bill to the Senate earlier this year, they decided that it's more important to preserve the filibuster than to preserve a woman's right to choose. And I don't want to see women die. So we've got to push the Senate to get rid of the filibuster, or we're not going to get this done.
Thank you. Candidate Hughes.
First, we have to have term limits for the Supreme Court. That's number one. We've seen the leaked document, but they're not doing their job right. First of all, on women's rights, they deserve to choose their own way of doing their bodies. Men shouldn't choose. Back in 1973, when they did the amendment for Wade versus Roe, they should have passed in Congress and made it a law. So that way we wouldn't be in this predicament. So right now, we don't have the Republicans. You're not going to get it passed. I'm sorry to say, Sean Caston, you're not going to get it passed. Republicans and Donald Trump, they don't believe in having abortions. So you're up an uphill battle. So what you need to do is do a new law. We have to get the House Speaker to get on the floor, up and down vote, and pass something new that's similar to Roe versus Wade, and be done with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 6, and we'll start with candidate Caston. What measures do you support to improve and secure voting rights in our country?
We talked about HR 1 that had the campaign finance reform. That also got rid of gerrymandering and a number of the other protections. The second big one is HR 4, and I'm going to keep coming back to the filibuster because it paces all this stuff. The last time the Voting Rights Act was amended, and the Voting Rights Act is the bill that says that states that violate people's voting rights, the federal government can step in, this pre-clearance process. The last time that was updated, it passed overwhelmingly in the House. I believe that was in the George W. Bush administration, overwhelmingly in the Senate. When we tried to pass it again this term, after all of the violations that you saw throughout the country, the Senate in a straight party line vote couldn't get it through cloture. They couldn't get this passed. I'm sorry to keep being such a broken record on this, but our founders gave us a government that depends on we decide hard questions by the will of the majority. They gave us a House where we decide hard questions by the will of the majority. They gave us a Senate that was designed to overrepresent land at the expense of people. Wyoming gets 2 senators. There's fewer people who live in Wyoming than live in the 6th district. And then they added the filibuster to that to provide even more minoritarian protections. We cannot do our job. We cannot do what the people want us to do. We cannot protect our democracy until we get rid of the filibuster.
Thank you. Candidate Hughes.
I think we should have an ID for voting so that it's fair across the board. A lot of people fought to have the right to vote. You can put it on your driver's license, and if you don't have a driver's license, state ID, and make it a federal law so it's across all 50 states, so there's no more games. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Newman.
Thank you. You know, critically important here, and it really is number one. We have lots of bills. I'm co-sponsored all of them, but critically important here is that we had the issue of pre-clearance, which was in the John Lewis bill. We have to make sure that there is federal pre-clearance of all voter laws, so we don't have all these rogue states going crazy on voter suppression. And the critical issues in whatever law we have to pass, number one is pre-clearance. Second is protecting the electoral count. We had some squishiness. We found the squishiness in the pattern, and what resulted was an insurrection. So we have to make sure we protect that. Thirdly, we have to stop suppression in all the states and all the various forms and wildly different forms that they try to attempt. We also have to end the filibuster. This crazy approach that we have right now has to stop. By the way, it's not a law. It is a Senate rule, and an unelected parliamentarian is the one that rules that, and we have to get rid of that. And then finally, we must expand the court and rebalance this heavily conservative court so that none of these laws get overturned.
Thank you. Question 7, and we will start with candidate Hughes. What steps will you take to reform current immigration policies?
Well, first of all, I would initiate the green card at the border, let everybody come in and it's legal, that doesn't have a felony, that can be, tracked a little bit, so to make sure we're not bringing terrorists in America. So we can give them a green card, let them in America, be part of America, because that's what we do. We, all of us are immigrants at one time or another, and we all gave to America. What we also could do is finally, Congress, maybe they can let all the citizens already in America that are in DACA pass the law instead of just pushing it down the road. And also, we can secure the border against terrorists, but also do the right thing by letting the right ones in. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Newman.
Thank you. So this is another one of those fights that I've spent 30 years on, going back to my high school and college years. In the district here, we're lucky to have these great organizations, ICER and SSIP and many others. And I've been thrilled to be working with them for decades. We must provide an expeditious pathway to citizenship. It is the moral thing to do. It will allow us to keep our principles as an America. And, critically important, if you're not going to do it for moral reasons, and you should, we should do it for practical reasons. If we were to provide a pathway to citizenship, our labor shortage would be gone in a matter of months. So whether you're doing it for moral reasons or practical reasons for the economy, let's get this done. I beg of everybody. But I feel very emphatic about this because we must live up to our American principles. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Caston.
I'd like to encourage all of my Republican colleagues that they should go read Ronald Reagan's farewell address when he said that the day America stops welcoming immigrants to our shores is the day we stop being Americans. I think we've forgotten that. We've, like so many of the things we've talked about tonight, we have done the work in the House. We passed the Dream and Promise Act to provide a path to citizenship for dreamers who are contributing to our economy and are wonderful people. We have passed the Farm Worker Modernization Act to address the fact that we have millions of primarily Central Americans who come here to make our food system work every year, and their families are broken up and divided. We should make sure that every student who comes and studies in our universities has a green card stapled to their diploma. My goodness, we have all this talent that we're capitalizing on. We should recognize that we are at this wonderful point in our economy right now where we are creating jobs faster than people. How do we fix that? My goodness, by opening our door, by embracing that vision of Ronald Reagan, by continuing to be the country that attracts the best and brightest to our shores. We know exactly what we have to do. We've done it in the House. We've got to get the Senate to pass it.
Thank you. Question 8, and we will start with candidate Newman. Do you support canceling student debt? And if so, to what degree?
So I'm a big fan of alleviating student debt. 4 years now, and have had these conversations with Senator Warren on student debt relief. I really like her model of relieving it by $50,000 on every $100,000 of debt with a requirement on household income. I think that's a very measured way to look at it. But this is a much bigger problem. Let's be clear. We have predatory lenders that are part of the federal government, but banking sources that are lending in a very predatory fashion. We must stop all this gouging of our best and our brightest, as well as those that don't deserve to be gouged, which is everyone. So at the end of the day, it is a multi-part solution. We have to relieve debt. We have to make sure that we bring tuition down. I am a big fan over a period of 10 to 15 years, allowing for free community college as well as access to trade programs, apprenticeships, and the like, and giving people credit for them as they work their way through. And then ultimately state college being much more affordable or free over a decade. So education is everything. It's what we're built on, and we have to start addressing it now, but in all of those ways.
Thank you. Candidate Caston.
So I want to echo what Congresswoman Newman said, that the root cause is we've got to get college tuition costs under control. I've introduced legislation that would permanently index the Pell Grants to inflation, because our Pell Grants have stayed flat even as tuition has gone up. And so students have had to borrow more and more. Here's the hard part. There are no good answers to this question. We are sitting here right now, we've got $1.7 trillion that is an asset on our books as the federal government, that is debt that is owed to the government by American borrowers. There's much more that sits out there that's held by private borrowers. These numbers are so massive that fiscally, it's really hard to think about how to do that in a fair way. Now, we've been talking about this, is it $10,000, $20,000, $50,000? Honestly, the right way to do that, I think, is to look at where the need is. Because if you're a student that can't afford to pay that debt, the government's not going to get it back anyway. And so if we can identify that and say, okay, we're not adding to the deficit by forgiving this, we're just recognizing a reality that already exists. The private sector knows how to do it. Government accounting doesn't do very well on that. I've had some conversations with the Federal Reserve and folks on the Financial Services Committee. We're trying to find a way to do that. But like I said, we don't have a really good solution yet, although I think we acknowledge the pain and know we have to solve it.
Thank you. Candidate Hughes.
That's a beautiful question. I've been waiting for this question all week. We have the banks bail out the kids. You know why? We bailed out the banks with Obama, have them pay the debt from the kids. And what we do is have Congress say, you pay back that money to the federal government or you pay their debt down. Now the problem is solved. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 9. We'll start with candidate Caston. What specific regulations will you propose to help curb global warming and other environmental issues?
And 1 minute's going to be tough. Look, as you know, I've
Let's
spent
do
my
a minute and a half then.
Okay, well, look, as you all know, I've spent my entire career focused on climate change. I've served on the climate committee, was one of 12 people that the speaker picked to represent the United States in Paris and then Glasgow. We largely wrote the climate package that became the president's climate bill and Build Back Better. The numbers are completely frightening. At a high level, here's what we have to do. We have to at least double the efficiency of the US economy, meaning using at least half as much fossil fuel to generate useful economic activity. That would take us up to the level that Britain's already achieved, by the way. We could triple it, go to Switzerland. This is a technology deployment problem. Second thing we have to do is that we have to figure out how to build, design, and deploy the technologies in those industries that demand fossil fuel and we don't know how to run them without them. How do we make fertilizer without natural gas? How do we make steel without coke? How do we make silicon without coal? And if you can't answer those questions, I don't know how to feed people or make a solar panel in a carbon-free world. And then the last thing is we've actually got to go backwards. We have to get to zero CO2 by about 1995 to give a sustainable planet to our kids. I've written bills that we've gotten about $1 billion out the door. On the deployment side of that, we've worked to develop legislation at the Securities and Exchange Commission to change the way that financial reporting happens. We're working hard to change the rules at FERC. For that first issue, it's a deployment problem. We've stood up $1 billion agency on a law that I wrote in the DOE specifically to develop technologies in those hard to decarbonize spaces. And on the going backwards, we need to do massive changes to our agricultural system to sequester carbon in soils. And we're reducing legislation shortly to do that and to change some of the cover cropping program. It's the beginning, it's not all of it. But we've basically got about 10 years to get this right. And we need to take this vastly more seriously than Congress has to date and move with the speed that the science demands.
Thank you. I think 2 minutes we should have given you. Candidate Hughes.
Well, we have to use all the above. We have to use wind, solar, electric, gas, oil, nuclear. That's number one, because the infrastructure is not in place yet, and we're still working on that. We also have to rely on foreign countries like China. They have all the minerals and stuff for the electric cars, which we're in trouble with that. So I say, first of all, diesel engines cause a lot of emissions. So we use natural gas for our like waste management trucks or refuge or CTA. That's what we've been doing. And it's really helped the carbon. And second of all, not letting Russia frack or drill oil unregulated. America gave them 100 million a day to do that, while American companies are regulated. I say we let the American companies do what they do best with natural gas, because natural gas is not really a fossil fuel. It's actually really good for the economy and the climate and the American jobs. If you look at natural gas, it's really clean and it really doesn't hurt the carbon. So we should use natural gas in Europe from America. We should drill in America because we drill better in America for oil than Russia does. And we can't just keep knocking everybody, because we can feed the world our energy. And if we feed the world the energy, we can control climate change. But if Russia and Venezuela and Iran and all the other companies do natural gas and oil, we can't control them. They're killing the ozone. So this is a world issue, not a global issue, not an American issue. So we have to do all the above. Let me throw out a name: Tom Fanning, CEO of Southern Company, which Sean should go talk to, because we need to redo the Green Deal because it's wrong. We can do a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Newman.
Thank you, and I will ask for the same amount of time that my colleague received as a starting point. But let me say something out of the jump, is that I have a very selfish reason for being emphatic about this. I've been a climate activist for 25 years. I was cleaning rivers with my kids and picking up trash in the forest starting 25 years ago. So I've been an activist in this area for a long time and feel emphatic. But here's why. I want my kids to be able to breathe. And I want their kids to be able to breathe. It's real simple, folks. So while I think the Green New Deal was an amazing mission that we could all work towards for getting reduced emissions by 100% in 2050, that is a great goal. When it was converted into the Thrive agenda is when we really started to cook with gas. I forgive myself for that pun. But it truly, the Thrive agenda does a good job of adapting a concept, which is the Green New Deal, and allocate it into green housing and green transportation. And I'll tell you why. We took that tip. I worked directly with Secretary Buttigieg, invited him into town, and we developed a pilot program that is now signed into law by President Biden. So right here in the Chicago area, at the Rail Center of Excellence, we are going to be studying high-speed rail, electrifying rail, renewables with rail, right here in Illinois. Those projects then will scale up to be part of our greater system in the nation. And I couldn't be prouder of that bill that I got signed into law. And it was wonderful working with the DOT, but we can do much more of this. We need to embed green ideals into all that we do. We have a huge toolbox. We have everything from calling out polluters and shutting them down, which I have done actually in my district with great activists. But we also can use market-based solutions that in fact will be very effective, whether it's cap and trade or carbon pricing. We have a huge toolbox. Let's use it.
Thank you. Question 10, and we'll start with candidate Hughes. What is your stance on criminal justice reform?
Well, we have to train all the police in the entire United States because we're all disconnected. Every state does a little bit different. They all need body cams. We all have to have ethic and diversity and inclusion. We have to give the judges a chance to see what's wrong or what's going on before we just shoot somebody. Because by killing people right off the bat, we're costing the city maybe, I think they spent $40 million in a month just in trial, just trying to, you kill guys 17 shots. How many bullets you need to put in somebody to kill them? So we're not doing the right thing. We have to have retraining across the federal government. We have to uniform our policing. We have to uniform our laws, and we have to do what's right for the minorities, because we're killing Black and brown children for no reason. You can't even tase them. And then they don't even get to the judge or the courts. So why do we have judges if we're just murdering our youth and our minorities? So what we all have to do is remember this. We're all parents, we're all mothers and fathers. We want our kids killed. So you put your child in their shoes, would you want your child murdered for no reason? No. So what you have to do is redefine the laws so it's fair across the board, because they're human too. So I think we need to do a better job in Congress, and universally, we have to think about the minorities and do what's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Newman.
So while this is a multi-tiered question, I have been in the ending gun violence space for, oh gosh, decades now, probably 20 years. I'm the former spokesperson for Moms Demand Action. So I've worked with a lot of anti-violence practitioners over the years. I've worked with law enforcement and community activists and community residents. So I took that model, and right here in Illinois 6 tomorrow, I will have my next meeting for the Public Safety Coalition. And there, what we are attempting to do is create a bank of legislative ideas that we can convert at both the state level and the federal level, but also addressing issues on the ground. The key points here is that violence and some of our safety issues are really rooted in despair and lack of hope. We need to actually invest in our communities, both businesses as well as community service, social services, healthcare, mental health care, and on and on. On the public safety side, we have to stop asking our officers to wear 17 hats every day. Let's give them the mental health experts, the social service experts, the caseworkers, so that when they go in and their expertise is public safety, they address it. And then finally, I'm a strong believer in really bringing our best and brightest to that incredibly noble position of a police officer and looking at that in a harder way, but also training them so they don't have to be all things to all people. It is a 360 approach that is working well right here in the New Illinois 6th on my coalition. And I couldn't be prouder to work with all of these amazing practitioners and law enforcement professionals.
Thank you. Candidate Caston.
So a couple of things. The first is I'd like us to stop this false dichotomy between police accountability and police resources. There's no conflict between making sure we have a well-resourced police department and there's accountability for bad apples. And I've yet to meet anybody in law enforcement who disagrees with that. There are more ways to address criminal justice than fascism at one extreme and anarchy at the other. The second is we got to be honest. The war on drugs is over and we lost. We've got to stop treating addiction as a criminal issue and treat it as a behavioral health issue that needs health resources. I agree with Congresswoman Newman. Crime is what happens when hope leaves the building. And if we get people who are depressed, who have addiction problems with treatment, start getting resources into those communities to give people hope, that's how we start to ease the pain. The last thing is we have too many guns and we have no federal gun trafficking laws. If we got rid of half the guns in the United States tomorrow, we would still have twice as many guns as any other country in the world on a per capita basis. And in Chicago, 40% of all the gun crimes are done with a gun that was illegally trafficked in from out of state. I've introduced gun trafficking bills to finally create federal gun trafficking laws with my colleague, Robin Kelly. And I'd like to see us get that to the floor.
Thank you. Question 11. What kinds of policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our community? Candidate Newman.
Thank you for that. Well, I think you heard in my last response that my approach is to bring all parts of a problem together and all the stakeholders. And I have a lot of experience in this area. So I have worked in the mental health area for decades because mental health is an issue right here in my family. And I've been working on those issues for a long time. What I would say is that it can be done legislatively, but we also need new attitudes in this country. So legislatively, I've just brought 2 bills to be introduced over the next couple of weeks. One is a bill that will do 2 things. It will stop our mental health provider shortage, but also help our schools. Mental health in our schools is actually the #1 area of issues right now in terms of growth in mental health issues. And so this bill would allow students that are in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year to come and provide support to other mental health care providers in schools. So it doubles our labor force in the mental health space in every school. But it also helps a pipeline to create better systems within the schools. So the second one is a mental health student helpline. We have a good one here in Illinois, but only 13 states do. So we have made that a federal funding project that will fund all states so that students can call into a mental health helpline. So those are some of the things that I've been working on. There's a much longer list though.
Thank you. Candidate Caston.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I thought I heard you ask a different question that I heard Congresswoman Newman answer, and I want to make sure that I didn't lose the thread there.
What kinds of policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our community?
Okay, that was what I thought you said. I'm struck that I think one of the greatest powers that we have as members of Congress is our public-facing voice and what we do and how we lead. We can't outlaw racism. We can make it a crime for domestic terrorism. We can make it a crime for hate crime, but we can't stop people for what's in their hearts. And one of the most beautiful moments that I've had as a member of Congress was the last conversation that I had with John Lewis before he passed. It was shortly after all the George Floyd protests were going on and that sort of nervous moment in our society. And John said, he started by saying, I thought we were past this. And it was shocking coming from him because I never heard him be anything but optimistic. And then he sort of smiled and he said, and I've never been more optimistic in my life. And I asked him why, and he said, because I see so many people out there marching who don't look like me. And there was something so beautiful that happened in that summer of all those people standing up. This wasn't all just the burden of the people who were bearing that burden. And those of us, I know a lot of us on this call who got up and participated, it meant so much to those people who were carrying that torch in the civil rights era. And I think if we continue to lead with love and show the way, we have such an impact as members of Congress, as leaders on that front, that I think makes it unnecessary, if we do it right, to try to fix this legally. Goodness knows, let's do both, but lead with love.
Thank you. Candidate Hughes.
Well, we have to give jobs to the minorities that don't have jobs instead of turning towards drugs. We can do that. We have to give them some education. We have to work with them and show them there's a different way. And the only way you could do that is by making a start. Instead of worrying about corporate money or dark money or raising money for campaigns, you don't need $1 million to be Chuck Hughes. You might only need 50,000. You don't need all that money. Maybe you want to give that PAC money to the minorities and help them get out of the rut. Maybe help them get better. So what we have to do is some positive feedback to the community, get them away from drugs, give them some jobs, give them some education, give them some love. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final question, and we'll start with candidate Caston. What specific steps will you take to address inequalities facing women in the United States, including the enactment of the Equal Rights Amendment?
Well, the beautiful thing, and I'm going to give this to you guys because you guys had educated me on this, but we passed the Equal Rights Amendment. We passed the amendment. We got 38 states to ratify. And then we now have everything that we need. There's this little legal debate, which I happen to disagree with it because of some language in the preamble. Somehow that's not effective. But Attorney General Barr directed the archivist not to amend the Constitution after that 38 states signed. And I would argue that we actually have everything we need now to enshrine the Equal Rights Amendment into law, to amend the Constitution. And I'd like to see everybody get up with their voices, including but not limited us, members of Congress, put some pressure on Merrick Garland to say, you could actually direct the archivist to do this, because last time I checked, all the boxes were checked. That's not enough, but it'd be a heck of a start, and it'd send a heck of a message.
Thank you. Candidate Hughes.
Well, if I remember right, Caston and Newman pushed that issue down the road by co-sponsoring someone from Atlanta. I say have an up and down vote and get it done and not play no more games. That's what I say. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Newman.
Thank you. Well, I think simply stated, getting ERA done. There is some kind of shenanigans going on from a legal standpoint. We just need to get it passed and be done with it. And I will say again, let's pass the Women's Health Protection Act in the Senate. And put pressure on them, quite frankly, as we have to start putting pressure on them. We've done a lot of good things in this Congress. We have passed the Paycheck Fairness Act and done a number of measures that, in fact, and I worked on probably upwards of 50 amendments that have been signed into various laws that we have in this Congress that would create more fairness for women. But at the end of the day, here's what I'll say, is that there's nothing like the lived experience and having someone that is of your gender in Congress. So we need more women in Congress. We need more representation, because we will address these issues in a unique lived experience way. So that's the best thing we can do in addition to passing ERA.
Thank you. And now we'll go to our closing. We'll start with candidate Hughes.
If you're tired of getting screwed all the time, you might want to make a different direction. Look at the United States Supreme Court. They screwed the women. They didn't have to do that. But in 1974, if Congress would have acted and made an amendment, they would have put it on the Constitution, we wouldn't be here. So you always have to think before you vote. But the main thing I'm going to tell every woman here, get out and vote. Because if you don't, you're going to lose more. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Newman, your closing statement.
Well, Chuck, thank you for that nice note. Well, thank you all. And thank you to the league for putting on. I know this is not a small task, so thank you for your great collaboration and work across all the leagues. And thank you to my colleagues on the dais. I think we've had a great discussion this evening. I'll leave you with two thoughts, results and representation. So in the new Illinois 6 and in my current district, which is the southwest suburbs and the western suburbs, I've brought over $240 million to the district. I have funded upwards of 20 community projects, which were community-based organizations that will have real impact on things like social justice and mental health. I'm thrilled about that. So results are important, but on the ground results are really important too. Things like flooding and postal delays and train delays. I've worked with our other government partners and will continue to, and you can count on that. Finally, the word representative is critically important to me. It's all about accountability. And because I have lived and born and lived here my entire life, I really believe that representation comes from representing everybody, not just some, not just your donors, but everybody. So that word representative is something I take critically important. I thank everybody tonight and have a good evening.
Thank you. Candidate Caston, your closing statement, please.
So the day I was sworn in, I remember Steny Hoyer pointed at the Capitol dome and he said to me, if you ever look at that and don't get the chills, it's time to retire. And I'm glad to say I still do. You know, being a member of Congress is a massive responsibility. I'm just one of 537 people who has the temporary privilege of holding federally elected office. And we're expected to understand and solve all the greatest challenges of our time. We're asked both to follow the will of the American people and to lead without ever, as Edmund Burke famously said, sacrificing our judgment to your opinion. Ultimately, we're asked to preserve our democracy and bring it a little bit closer to perfection. And doing that requires, superhuman combinations of energy, intellect, ethics, empathy, and wisdom. No one can do that every day. And somehow we have managed to elect people, collectively have done that on most days. And that is not because we elect superheroes. It's because of the wisdom of the American people and the magic of democracy. And I want to thank the League for all you do to make sure that voters are informed and that they vote. And I know I speak for all of us here tonight when I say that we trust your judgment.
Thank you. Thank you all of you candidates. Your participation is now complete. Please stop your video and mute your audio. Our time is up for this evening's forum. Thank you for attending. We appreciate your participation, whether you are a candidate or a voter. For 100% nonpartisan election information, please go to the IllinoisVoterGuide.org, powered by the League of Women Voters of Illinois, and visit the local league's website posted on your screen, where you will also find a recording of this forum and information on future forums. Please remember to vote. It is essential to our freedom and our country. Thank you.